It's done. Okay. So hello and welcome to the 8th Foundation Day celebration of DMI. I am Surya Bhushan, one of the faculty here at DMI, and I'm your host for the next 2 hours and so. So it's my privilege and great pleasure on behalf of DMI to welcome all of you who have joined offline. Some of you have online also. So as someone said, the show must go on. So not for this show, but I appreciate your effort to get together virtually in this unprecedented situation, which the world is facing due to one coronavirus, which is not visible through the naked eye, but it has put our life on pause and asking some hard question, difficult question to deal with the risk and uncertainty certainly around us. So the world has adjusted and responded in various ways, and we too wanted, in fact, to strive towards that. So this year we propose to have a grand Foundation Day lecture, and it's a massive departure from the earlier 7th Foundation Day celebrations, which we used to have through, in fact, 2 days celebrations, and we generally go out. So currently the situation doesn't allow us to do that. So, and with great given paucity of time, we wanted to make it this particular Foundation Day lecture on the localizing development, governance and planning to make it academically very productive. So I welcome once again all of you, and please allow me to ask our director to say his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Surya Bhushan. Thank you, Professor Surya Bhushan. Good morning, everyone. Respected Sri Vijayanand ji, respected our chairman. I'm told that chairman is unable to join because he has an appointment for a medical checkup. And respected Principal Secretary RDD Sri Arvind Chaudhary ji, respected members of DMI Society and Board of Governors, invited guests, alumni, my colleagues who are joining in person at the Institute, and those who are joining in online, and PDM participants. Today we come together to commemorate our 8th Foundation Day. This is in its institutional life, DMI now prepares to enter adolescence. In the early years, in the past, as Professor Surya Bhushan just mentioned, we used to organize a symposium spread over 2 days. And our effort at that point in time as a new institute was to announce ourselves to the world, to announce ourselves to our stakeholders. Like product launch, you do it, you try and make a splash. And that was our effort. And we seem to have succeeded to some extent in doing that. As we prepare to enter adolescence, we need to get more focused. We need to be more deliberate in our decisions and deliberate in our academic engagements. And this year we have, with taking a break, we are initiating the Foundation Day lecture. Though it's the 8th Foundation Day, this is our first Foundation Day lecture, and we wish to make it an annual event. And the event, we have to have the focus. We are extremely grateful to Sri Vijayanand ji for having accepted our invitation to be the first speaker. and in the series of lectures that we are going to organize over the next years. He will be speaking on local development, governance, and planning. In a way, the topic is a placeholder. Sir has had the best experience of being there in a steering capacity with the while People's Plan campaign was launched and carried out in Kerala, and several such initiatives that have been undertaken not only in Kerala but also in some other parts of the country. He's been a staunch votary of strengthening local governance with special emphasis on local self-governments and local self-government institutions, what we call panchayats and municipalities. He's had the privilege of being there, working in an administrative and advisory capacity with the local governments, and we couldn't have thought of a speaker more experienced and erudite on the subject. Within the continuing and renewed commitment of national and state governments on development, locality is best seen as a focus. Even during the Corona pandemic period, now case studies are emerging how local efforts in dealing with the pandemic seem to have bore very helpful results. And on the other hand, it is the locality where lives are lived, life worlds are formed. Ultimately, all the constitutional commitments that we have made about opportunity, equality of opportunity and freedom of expression, all of it either is enabled to a large extent or disabled because of the experiences at the locality. It is the focus on locality that we are, as at DMI, we are committed to work on in the next few years. Being located in Bihar, our focus would be on poor and ultra poor, to work at the grassroots level, and therefore to initiate various types of academic engagements in our research, in our teaching, in our capacity building initiatives on locality development. This is the topic that we are committed to, and I am happy that we have had this opportunity to initiate our engagement with the topic with this year's Foundation Day lecture. And we would be launching into not only a research program, but we will be thinking through as to what are the different types of engagements that we can have with locality development. And when we say locality development, it is about local governance, and within governance, planning is the major mechanism, and planning and coordination, other forms of coordination that are required to usher in and to give a thrust to the development of the locality. And today's lecture will show us some directions. We hope that we will have the privilege of receiving continued guidance from Sri Vijayanand sir. And I welcome you all to this lecture and hand over the mic back to Professor Surya Bhushan.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. So certainly we are focusing on this and our commitment, particularly from the DMI side. So before I will invite the speaker of the day, so we'll try to show you how we have seen this particular topic from our. In fact, it's a little bit on that. It's and what you are expecting in the next 1.5 hours or so. So if you see, we have already, please go to the next slide. Okay. So we have already gone into the welcome, and then I'll just introduce you the topic. So it's, and then we'll have proceed with the lecture, and then it will end with the vote of thanks. So this is what the proceedings would be for the next 1.5 hours. So then we try to decode this particular theme, the localizing development, governance and planning. So what it means, certainly when we see the root word of localizing, it emerges from the local. So what is the meaning of the local? And so local is it's a noun as well as it has an adjective. So of a particular place near to you, that is how it is. And so how local becomes localizing. It's like something, as linguistic nerds used to say, that it is it's basically making a noun or adjective to the verb. So it gives this is what the denominalization, I think our speaker today is well versed in, because he's an English student, English literature student. So this is basically, we are making this localizing as a denominal verb. So what does it mean? So if you want to make something very definite, that is how it has emerged. Let me give you that example. Like if I say I bike somewhere, that means I have not used car. Bike here is used as a verb. So that is how the localizing word itself has given the context in this development part. And then we try to understand what is development. This is another very complex things which everyone is grappling with, because the word itself has emerged from the opposite of the word. So underdevelopment. So something is underdeveloped. So let us try to make that as a developed. And as our director just said, that we wanted to make particularly on the ultra poor and poor. So at one time, I remember the Gunnar Medal also said on that, development is nothing but making the upliftment of or you can say the socially, those who are excluded in the scheme, the whole scheme of the things. That is what, but it is not so easy to define. As we see, it covers all the aspects of your life. So it is not only economic development, it is also to do with the social, psychological, you can say the cultural. There are so many things on the development. And in the last 20th century, this is the word which is most discussed and debated and deliberated. So in that way, we try to understand what is it. So it's like, for example, if we are talking about the development is nothing but a change, something delta which is happening to you. So what is a change? Like at one time, we used to say that electricity is good for the development. Is it good enough? Now people are talking about the need to have an internet connectivity to have a better life. So it keeps on changing its goal positions also. So there is nothing which we can fix on. This is what we can achieve. But certainly there are means to strive towards a better life. That is what the whole discussion we expect, and particularly on the lecture side. So a definite improvement, then the continuity, because it has to be continuous, and at the same time it has to be aligned with whatever we strive towards, the values and capacity which they have. And that is where the localizing development means. So and once we have fixed on, because that is where any kind of program which you are talking about has to have the three important elements attached to that. So whatever we are doing, it has to have universality, as SDG goals defined in these three principles. So whatever you say, it has to not include somewhere, exclude some. So it has to have a universality. And then at the same time, it should be integrated. So as we see the complexity of the phenomena, so you cannot leave something in silos and something is working fine. So it doesn't take care of that. So that is where the integration part becomes very important. And ultimately it has to transform. So it has to change itself to the new position. That is what. So localizing development, we try to understand from these three principles, which in fact, the empowerment theory says that first of all, you need to understand what is the preconditions, what is the resources which you have at disposal. And at the same time, once you have them, then what is the agency, what is the processes which you are finding, which you are following. So where is the why, where is the participation? That is where the localizing development becomes very important, the concept itself. And then what is the outcome which we are expecting in the process. So as the two big questions we have already circulated, a very brief, you can say, extremely brief notes on our thought on this foundation lecture. The two big questions which we expect from our speaker today may also would like to address on that. So this is how is the relationship between various stakeholders at the local level and development being structured, and are there a specific institutional arrangement? So this is where we are talking about to facilitate this process. Now, our speaker today, we all know he's a now retired as an IAS officer of 1981 batch. He was former chief secretary to the government of Kerala. Currently, he is a chairman of 6th State Finance Commission. Is one of the architects of Kerala's democratic decentralization initiatives. He steered the seminal People's Plan campaign of Kerala that led to the decentralization revolution in the state. He also, and that is where he officiated in various capacity as a secretary, an additional charge of secretary in the rural development, Panchayati Raj, and then again, he was the chairman of the executive board of Kerala Institute of Local Administration, which basically he has spent more than a decade there and nurtured it into an international center for excellence for capacity building in the local governance and decentralized planning. So this is where his and he was another. I do not know in such a short span of time a person can do so many things. So and he was also conceptualized and mentored this Kudumbashree, which is one of the most cited SHG program, the self-help group program, which leads to the empowerment of the woman, and they are working in various capacities, and it got a lot of acclaim within the state as well as abroad also. And so, and he is also supporter and mentor of various right-based campaigns and movements, and that is where we can see he's a very Gandhian in his approach. If you see from the kind of work he's engaged with, and post-retirement, he's currently the governing board of a lot of great NGOs like Pradhan and BRLF and then Palliam, India, and then COSPOD. And academically, I said in the beginning also, he was university topper in English literature and secured 7th rank in his civil service examination. So I once again welcome our speaker. Sir, now floor is yours. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, Professor Surya, my friend, Professor Devi Prasad Mishra, and distinguished participants. So I feel honored being invited by DMI for this lecture. I consider that DMI, I knew its conceptualization. I was in Delhi at the time, and that is being kind of nurtured as an IRMA of the East, so that what IRMA could contribute to cooperatives, certainly DMI could contribute to local development. And in my lecture, I think I will focus on the rural. Local can be urban, local can be anywhere, but I will focus on the rural because that is more specific and probably I can tell you more. So just before I start my lecture, I want to, now post-COVID, everybody, even high-end economists, have recognized the importance of the local. Earlier, we thought it's all global. Yes, global exists, but localizing development, what Gandhiji wanted, many of the things can be produced locally. And post-COVID, we all survived because things could be produced and procured locally. So local economic development is assuming more importance. And I think in this kind of scenario, that will be the situation. Now, the institution for local development can only be a local government. It cannot be anything else. Let's be very clear. There is no developed country in the world, democratic or not, which does not have an effective, empowered, elected local government. Unfortunately, in India, we have been believing that we can get bright young people to deliver development. They can assist, but they can't. So somehow, I don't know the reason why an elected local government seems to be a necessity for that. And in India, it's a, I would say it is a serial tragedy of missed opportunities. Talking of local governments. At the time of freedom with Gandhiji in the forefront, everybody thought that Panchayati Raj would be built into our constitution. But there was a kind of a debate with Dr. Ambedkar, who was also right, saying that these are dens of feudalism, casteism, corruption, localism, and all that. So at that time, Dr. Ambedkar's view prevailed. But now looking back, of course, it's not proper to look back at history and say, had things been like this, then we will get into a lot of conflicts. But I can tell you, you look back, who are the freedom fighters of India? They were ordinary people, farmers, workers, teachers, lawyers, students. And what did they do after freedom? India got freedom. They went back to their places, and most 90% of villages. Had they become the village panchayat members and presidents and sarpanjas, I'm sure India would have been a different place. But now there's no point in trying over that. Then we went ahead with centralized planning. Not centralized planning. We went ahead with planning with relative success, or better success than any other country of our stature, that we shouldn't forget. Now, a lot of people say it is all license, permit, and all that. It was not. I can tell you the basis of India's development was laid during the initial maybe 10, 15 years of planning. And after a plan, we knowing the story, after a plan, we realized that something is missing. So they rethought the value of local governments. I don't know. Then we tried to get the local governments on. Balwant Mehta committee, formal inauguration in Rajasthan, excellent infrastructure for local governance, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, and some other states. But then Chinese war, drought, food crisis, the Pakistan war, we all had to divert our attention from local governance to food security. And we did very well. And we spent a lot of effort, and that became technological, not participatory. So it went in, and even when we launched the so-called Garibi Hatao, it is more technological and professional and less participatory. Till in the late 70s, the then Janata government set up the Ashok Mehta Committee report, which pushed for a three-tier decentralized governance like we are having now, the district, block, and the village. But then, unfortunately, the government fell. Then, in the mid-80s, Rajiv Gandhi revived this power to the people discourse. He couldn't bring the amendment. And then, early 90s, surprisingly, a minority government brought in a major constitutional amendment and did the whole changes. But then, after the 73rd Amendment, and it almost coincides with the time we had our economic reforms. 91, the economic reforms. 93, the Constitution Amendment was noted. 94, it came into effect. But I think, again, looking back, we forgot governance reforms when we went for economic reforms. So without governance reforms, at least at the grassroots level, economic reforms will not reach the peak. That is a big lesson we are learning. And now, so I talked about the missed opportunities. Now, when you look at local governments, where did they originate? Of course, India had local governments in the olden days, and the Chola people had very good local governments, but they were very local and all that. But now, in the British, the modern local governments take their roots from industrializing Europe. When people rushed to towns, towns became very bad, living conditions became very bad, particularly health, due to insanitary conditions. So it originated around health, sanitation, water, little bit of street lighting. So we still call them civic bodies, the so-called civic kind of things. And civic communities are very important. After 75 years of independence, we are racing against time to provide basic sanitation and water supply in villages, something which ought to have come to already. So that is local development starts with this core civic functions. And Only local governments and only elected local governments can provide them. But the importance of local governments, that is something which you who are studying development know that, but I want to give you a quick run through on why local governments are important. Of course, I can give the constitutional arguments, they have been made, the constitutional arguments. And the Constitution of India, I don't know how many of you have reflected on that, have transformed, at least in the constitutional scheme of things, the local governments from civic bodies to developmental entities, because the Constitution assigns them the critical tasks of economic development and social justice. These words are from the Constitution. And the word used is planning. And planning means, as is mentioned in the introductory, in the welcome speech, planning means bringing different stakeholders, participants together in a kind of a exercise to identify your needs. So, from civic and welfare institutions, these have moved into developmental institutions. And there are so many arguments for local governments. One, of course, the big argument, democratization. Democratization means people's participation. As Gandhi said, the last person should come first. So that is democratization, not just votes and freedoms, but it is face-to-face democracy. And local governments kind of develop multiple pluralist democracy. So that different stakeholders, after some time, initially there could be exploitation, there could be corruption, there could be feudal kind of thing or caste domination. But after a time, I call it by seeing, people understand how levers of power are people, and they will come to what I call a modus vivendi that we need to develop. Again, this is not theory. From my 25 years of experience in Kerala, I was involved in people's plan from day one, the day the cabinet note was written, and continued for 15 long years. And even now, as the chairman of the 6th State Finance Commission, I am associated with understanding what happened in 25 years and what went wrong. I think Professor Devi Prasad Mishra also once came down to Kila to help us understand what Kerala did and what Kerala didn't. Then there is development arguments, because our topic is local development. From Kerala's experience, I find there is diffused economic stimulus. Funds go to different parts according to a formula. And that should be a formula which gives weightage to equity, not just population. Which means backward areas get more money. There is a local stimulus, which has not been studied much. And so that is very, very important, because you know, as development, students of development, that whatever be the intention of government, whatever be politics and policies, the funds get pulled to certain areas which have greater capacity for spending. So you take India. Since you're sitting in Bihar, I know DMI is not just for Bihar, but sitting in Bihar, Kerala spends more money under NGNRGS than Bihar, which probably has one of the largest percentages of people to the poverty line. Because government needs, for example, you have an NDA government, but most money gets spent in the southern states. Not that southern states are more efficient, because they started spending earlier and they can pull funds. This is one of the biggest problems in development, that funds will get pulled where there is expenditure capability. And I'm sure within Bihar also you have such regions. In Kerala, I can tell you, without decentralization, even with so-called progressive governments, money would be spent in Trivandrum, Kochi, Kottayam, and little bit and north to this, and the east to that west. So it is very, very important that localizing means you get money, people decide, and all that. There are so many theories. There's a heterogeneity of demand. You don't know demand from Bihar, you don't know demand from Trivandrum, you know demand at the village level. This is this. And also possibilities of development. Possibilities of development are not very macro. Macro, of course, policies are there. At the micro level, which field needs what kind of support? And which local industry can develop? And how a local market can develop. So there are a lot of points for this kind of things. And Kerala experience shows that local governments have been very good in providing basic minimum needs infrastructure. And surprisingly, I don't know the reasons for that, they have been largely pro-poor in their development. Of course, partly it can be attributed to the politics of Kerala. Kerala Panchayats are political even at the ground level. But, and then another thing is, they have also been very good, which none of us even theorized or dreamt, in what I call care and compassion. Looking after the elderly, looking after persons with disabilities, looking at palliative care, cancer patients. These local governments have performed better than the best governments and in the last 20 years. And by improving infrastructure, they have improved public service delivery institutions, Anganwadis, schools, and hospitals. All over India, and it was true of Kerala also, people were migrating from public institutions to private institutions, often unnecessarily and wasting their precious resources earned through labor. In Kerala, which set up its health facilities in the 60s and 70s, then the decline started. People started moving to private schools. Same thing with education. People started moving to private schools. But, and this is not impressionistic anecdotal evidence, after decentralization, not just due to decentralization. Decentralization means that panchayats are left to do whatever they want. We all work together. That is the whole concept of multi-level planning. So something from Delhi comes, something from the state, something from local. So that is the kind of synergy which is very important for local government. So it's not top-down, it's not bottom-up. There is this multi-level, what the old planners used to call iterative planning. You keep going up and down, and then you arrive at a consensus, which is much more productive than anything else. So in health, when Kerala went in for the People's Plan, a big survey was done by one of the biggest non-government organizations in India. It doesn't call itself an NGO. It's called the Kerala Sastra Sahitya Parishad, which is basically a people's science movement, which is quite active in Bihar also as a very powerful people's science movement. I think they were all related. And they found out that only 28% of Kerala's population, at the time of poverty was more than 33, was using the public health facilities. Then in 2015, that's not a Kerala study, it's an NSSO data, the percentage went up to 33 and 1/3. And 2018, just before the COVID, it reached 47.7%, more than 50 in rural areas. I'm sure post-COVID, which is unexpected, the public health facilities have improved, trust has improved. So from 28 to moving to 50 in 25 years is a reverse thing. It's not easy. Same thing. Students, many government schools, when I was planning secretary in the early 2000s, there was a proposal to close down schools, saying that there are no children. Of course, Kerala's demographic dividend also, which means you have smaller population, already reached zero growth, so you don't require new schools. But now there is a gradual shift, not as dramatic as health, of children coming back to government schools. So improvement of service delivery is another local development. And then, of course, your civic services, they generally perform well. And another important feature, general feature, is diversity of development models. You leave it to the people, they come out with interesting models. I can give you 5 or 6 very good models which are of international quality, developed by local governments in India, just by looking at local problems, trying to eke out their resources. And then they tend to prefer affordable technologies. And they try to converge resources. Because in government, we are in silos. We don't converge. As Government of India Secretary, I found even 2 joint secretaries were not converging. And even funny, a joint secretary handling 2 subjects, they wouldn't be able to converge the 2. It's a fact. I see Arvind on the screen. I think he would agree to my thing. It's very difficult to converge. It's one of the most difficult things in convergence. But at the panchayat level, convergence happens naturally. Because you see a problem, you want a solution. You are not health department, you are not agriculture department. That's the kind of thing which good panchayats do. And of course, quicker outreach, faster feedback, and trend line of governance. That is a revelation. Kerala didn't give natural calamities and disaster management local government. So I lobbied a lot in my earlier days, and people just didn't listen to me. But we had a disastrous floods in 2018. And post that, the local governments came to the front. Nobody asked them. They saved the situation. The first responders automatically, and they teamed up with civil society organizations, NGOs, most importantly, the Kudumbashree SNGs, without any government direction. And that during the COVID peak, especially second wave, I was keeping in touch with most of what is happening in central India through these kind of webinars, and I found where panchayats are practically non-existent or very weakly empowered. The panchayats, the SHGs, and the civil society came together again willy-nilly. Nobody pushed them, and they saved the situation, especially the latter half of the first wave and the core of the second wave. So even returning back, I don't want to get into the issues of COVID. So that is again very, very important. And better targeting, it goes without saying. So they can do this kind of development. And now there are possibilities. So it's and the beauty of local government is you keep on addressing new problems. So now some local governments of Kerala have started carbon neutral local governments to understand carbon neutrality at local level. Of course, it's facilitated by good NGOs, civil society. So a lot of things can happen, but that are the development kind of arguments. And rights-based development. Again, rights get better implemented at the local level because people can go and demand. It doesn't happen, nothing happens ipso facto. You need a lot of preparation, and I can give a 3-hour lecture on how you prepare to do decentralization. Doing decentralization itself is a great difficult thing. It doesn't happen. You give money, you give powers, things will not happen. So that is not the topic of my day. Then the fiscal arguments for decentralization. See, local people are willing, they may not be willing to pay taxes, but they are willing to make contributions, much more than we can ever imagine for development, which is very important. Local contributions. And contribution doesn't have to be in cash or kind. It has to be in terms of management. I will run the school, you just give me this. The PTA will run it. I will run this irrigation scheme. I will run this water supply scheme. Just you give me the basic investment. I'll meet the recurring costs. We will meet the recurring costs. So community-based kind of local assets, civic assets are also very, very there. And financially, that is very, very important. So local resource mobilization is again another area for local development. And user charge. I find local governments are better at user charge mobilization than that. Then again, it's a truism that you can't have development without good governance. Good governance is a sine qua non of development. Without that, you can't have. And in local government, there is a lot of possibilities for structuring good governance because it's a zero base. Most places local governments don't exist, or they're very weak. So you can start with an ideal kind of accountability, less of conflict, more responsiveness, more transparency. So all these things can be structured, particularly this social accountability. With e-governance, it's even more dramatic. Things have improved perhaps more after I retired than before. And these advantages all lead to local development. I was addressing years ago, I think almost 20 years ago, some panchayat people in Tamil Nadu on panchayats. So a lady panchayat president, she was, I don't think she was a very literate lady and looked very poor. She got up and gave me a lesson in good governance, which I've been repeating. Maybe I've repeated more than 1,000 times in every lecture. She said, sir, probably she was a Christian. In the Bible, there is a saying, knock and shall be opened. So you come and knock, which means the God will open. And that's a principle of temples or any kind of thing. You go and knock before God and God responds. She said, sir, in panchayats, most people cannot come and knock because they are away. They can't come to the panchayats. So she said, opening the door, of course she said in Tamil, opening the door on hearing the footsteps. That is good governance. Now reflect on it. Anywhere is anticipatory. People who need good governance cannot come to government. Anywhere, even in Kerala, where access is much better. So opening the door on hearing the footsteps is probably the best definition of good governance I've ever heard in my life. I was administrative reforms committee member secretary of Kerala, and I'd read a lot on good governance at that time. Nothing matches this simple definition. And this is the foundation of development. The last person getting in first is the foundation of development. So, which obviously the argument that local governments can deliver works very well. But then, so I talked about good governance. I talked about how the whole movement started and how it can do. So, what are the functions which local governments can do that I mentioned? So you go through the constitutional scheme of things and look at it, you will find that it is very neatly given that most of the functions, civic functions are there. I don't want to classify. Human development functions are there. Economic development functions are there. Economic environmental functions are there. Human development functions are there. Then, of course, poverty reduction, which is a subset of human development, is also very much there. Now, it's very easy to say this, and I think Professor David wanted how exactly you can structure an institutional arrangement for local government. So, basically, from my experience, and now I can theorize it, it is based learning by doing. First thing is, you have to be very clear on what functions you are giving local governments. You can give nothing. It's a political decision. But what you are giving, you are very clear. And every citizen is clear. The local government has to be clear. Every citizen clear. And every functionary clear on that. Then, very important, what you are giving, don't give it to anybody else. Again, a very simple principle. Otherwise, people will go to the Gram Panchayat, then they will go to the BDO, they will go to the collector, they will go everywhere. But this accountability. And then people ask, local, like for example, Bihar is one of the weakest local governments in the country. People say they are corrupt. We can't trust them. Yes, they may be corrupt. Maybe they can't be trusted. They have very weak capacity and they will have a lot of feudal characteristics. But you give them responsibility. The biggest thing in devolution is not money or functions, it is trust. That is what happened during COVID. They had no money, they had no powers, but they did. So what trust, when government trusts them, people will trust them, they push. So this is again, this looks very philosophical, it is not. You trust them, you do it, I will not do it. Nobody else will do it. Then a local pressure happens. Now we are not doing that. We are giving local governments money, they will eat up half of it or most of it. Nobody asks them. So it's as if you are giving them some offers. Okay, you do whatever you want with it and keep quiet. No. So you're carving out a developmental function or whatever function and giving it to it. So once you give it, it's a very simple exercise. That is, once you give it, you know the money which government has been spending in the past on doing those things. That much alone you give it. It's called fiscal decentralization, giving them money. And then once you do the fiscal decentralization, how do you give it? You give them like you spend 5 rupees on roads, you spend 3 rupees on hospitals, 2 rupees on poverty reduction. To the extent possible, give it practically untimed. Not that you can eat up the money. So you have freedom of local application. That's the biggest advantage for local development. It's the freedom of application. Do I buy seeds? Do I improve irrigation? Do I buy implements, common implements for the farmer? It's left to the local decision making. So that is very important. And then the biggest failure of Indian local governments is they don't have staff. People are unwilling to go to staff. Even if they have some staff position, they will be unfilled. I'm sure Bihar has that problem. when I went and met your chief minister years back in 2015. We had a long conversation on helping Bihar in Panchayati Raj because the 15th Finance Commission, Bihar got the second highest in the country. So they had to spend the money and they can spend only through village panchayats. And the CM raised a lot of valid questions, very valid questions. One of the questions was this human resources. So, which can you suddenly create tens of thousands of posts? You can't. So, you work with civil society organizations. You work with, like for example, Bihar is, I would almost equate it to Kerala in terms of the strength of its SHG program, Jivika, which again is a national one. And your SHGs have developed over 15 years, and some of them can give services to the panchayats, electronic services, even accounting services, extension services. So it's a win-win situation. Because of this, they also pressurize the local governments to deliver services. Because look, these women know better than anybody else in the village what government delivers. Unfortunately, now we give only government programs to this women. Give them the local programs and they will do this very well. And in this functional partnership, the biggest functional partnership where I've been requesting Arvind also personally, try to bring the panchayats and the SHGs together, not one under the other. Then they will follow. One of them will be destroyed. So bring them together in a functional relationship of equals. You're equal, you're functional, and you will work. I can tell you, it can bring miracles. What is the biggest failure in Panchayat Raj? There is no Gram Sabha is weak. People don't ask. People don't, but SHGs can ask. And in a normal village, 60% of the women, which means 60% of the families, would belong to SHGs. And they can collectively demand. Collective demand is very difficult in a rural society. It all becomes caste and party. But probably SHGs can demand superseding these narrow identities of party, caste, village, and sub-village and all. So you structure, it has to be a structured relationship. It has to be learned by doing. You can't suddenly have a theoretical kind of relationship. But what has been the effect of Kerala's partnership? I would say the unique feature of Kerala's decentralization is a partnership between SHGs and the local governments since 98. Our Kudumbashree was inaugurated by Shri Vajpayee ji in 98. And we took a conscious decision, a written decision, that the two shall work together. So we called it the next step in democratic decentralization. It is communitizing local governments. Can be done. I can tell you, it can be done in any scenario. But it needs to be structured. You have a lot of capacity building, and you can't transgress your limits. But that is something, because development, I'm not talking about big development and big industry and all that. Local development, this partnership contributes more than anything else. So this is again something eminently doable. So this function in the Ministry of Panchayat Raj used to call them functionaries. They call it 3 F's of decentralization. So I'm not getting into all the institutional details. It's a very elaborate thing. How do you institutionalize this so that they can get into all the stakeholders, get in touch with all the stakeholders and bring them into local development. So I told you the advantage of panchayats in development and what they have actually empirical evidence from Kerala and how to bring about this institutional structuring. Then, in fact, I have a 9F framework. So F1 is functions, F2 is functionaries, which I mentioned now. F3 is finances. It can be F2 and F3 can interchange, which also mentioned. And F4 is a framework, a very good framework, within which there is a lot of freedom. You can't just work without a framework. This designing framework is very difficult. As bureaucrats, we all tend to be very restrictive. Then comes F5, which is within the framework. What are your freedoms? What are the limits to freedom? And what are the freedom? This. And then comes what I call, just for the getting the F thing through, whole fraternity. Fraternity means partnership. So you need everybody. You need local traders, local manufacturers, all this into a fraternity. And your SHG is itself part of the fraternity. And this and DMI should be part of the fraternity. I'll come to that. That'll be my last point. What DMI can do for Panchayat. And why you should do for Panchayat. Panchayat Raj is, look, we say we don't want, Bihar can choose, we don't want Panchayat Raj. But I can tell you how you should get into it. So that is the fraternity part of the thing. Then comes what is called facilitation, where DMI can play. Don't think just as I told you, giving money and powers will make panchayats work. It requires rigorous facilitation. After 25 years of decentralization, I would say we are still off the drawing board, or not even off the drawing board. Though we may get a lot of awards, the national best and all that. But this is still work in progress. It's very intense, rigorous. As secretary, having gone through it, I can tell you it's very rigorous. In fact, your work increases after you give all powers to panchayats. So that facilitation, in which I think Kila, we have mentioned, Kila does that training, all those kind of things. Then comes what I call functionings. The word used by Amartya Sen. Lot of potential is there. I've been talking about potential. That potential has to be converted into realities. So capabilities to functionings. That small shift, but that is a big shift and a long, big gap. So we all fail at the local level. So there again, DMI and institutions of this have, I would say, even a moral obligation to go ahead and do that kind of thing, so that it converts into outcomes. And what I told you, these are the development outcomes in Kerala, can be achieved in reality. And then the last F, I would say, is some kind of future. What do we look at in future? I'm not looking at the constitutional scheme of things, but one disadvantage in most part of India is panchayats are very small, but Bihar has large panchayats. I think they are the viable size. Kerala is too large a panchayat. I think Bihar is some 10, 15,000, and that is a viable size for most kind of work. And then we are guided by a lot of myths and fears about panchayats. I've been talking about panchayats for more than 30 years or 35 years with different people, without having gone through, without any empirical evidence. They say panchayats are corrupt, panchayats have no capacity, panchayats are political, panchayats are messy, panchayats, and all kinds of allegations. But have you tried improving? I don't think anybody could do that. Now, the planning part. So panchayats and development, probably I have told you enough. And we have been trying to do a lot of local planning. In fact, much before local planning formally started, when we started with plans, we talked of multi-level planning. I think in the late 60s, guidelines came for block level planning, but not democratic, technically. Then became district level planning in the 80s. But after the constitution says, you shall prepare district plans. It's a mandatory thing. Somebody can go to the court if you don't prepare. I don't think any state is prepared. The DPC, the District Planning Committee, is one of the weakest constitutional institutions, practically non-functional across the country. It's the most functional in Kerala, but even there falls short of the constitutional mandate. So that is again a major challenge for you. And then there is a very important concept of planning. Planning itself is a course, so I will not get into that. But to tell you, for planning, there is an excellent guideline issued by the then Planning Commission. It was actually prepared by the Ministry of Panchayat Raj. Many of us would have been associated. It was issued, I think, in 2008 or 9. It's called Guidelines of District Planning. It's a very good document. I would request all students to download it and go through it very quickly. What is district planning? Now, our former president, Dr. Abdul Kalam, gave a great idea. It is called Pura. What is Pura? Provision of urban amenities in rural areas. Unfortunately, we in the bureaucracy didn't understand the spirit of Pura. I had the fortune of listening to President and even interacting with him on what is Pura. And reading, of course. Pura is the concept for India's rural area. It is not just going and giving water supply, sanitation, road to a panchayat. That is artificial. We are trying to do. We'll give east everything. It doesn't work. It is bringing about 8 or 10 villages into a spatial network. So your population, which is 10,000, will become 50,000. It becomes a viable area for what he calls giving all connectivity. knowledge connectivity, electronic connectivity, financial connectivity, is a bank, physical connectivity, and then kind of a development thing is set off. Development impulse is created. It's a fascinating concept that government of India has been trying to do through what is called urban. So I'm not, but I don't think it has been very successful. That is the informal feedback I get on this. So this is spatial planning for local development. So we have a socio-economic planning and spatial planning, and we need to bring them together, one on the other. With modern technology, it becomes very, very easy. So that is very, very easy. I think you should help. There must be some urbans going on in Bihar, and probably take a urban and develop it. And as per President of India's, when he was president, he has written on this, most of the puras were done by education institutions. At least 2 of the 5 were done by education institutions on their own, without any government support. So that is something which probably you can do. Now, to conclude, what should be the way forward? So I would say one important thing is that you need to focus on what I may call beacons. You can't suddenly develop the tens of thousands of panchayats. Or in India, I think there are more than 265,000 or 269,000 panchayats. You can't develop all of them, however hard you try. But you can develop clusters, resource clusters. That is how the NRLM reached the kind of size it could over 6-7 years. At the time when it was launched, we had calculated with my friend Mr. T. Vijayanand, who led that and who was a great supporter of Bihar thing, and probably he helped Bihar even before he became government of India, Joint Secretary, on this, what we call resource cluster. Invest all your energy into one cluster. So I wouldn't say you take 100 clusters in Bihar, take one cluster in a difficult area, in an impossible area. That Arvind pointed out to DMI. And that cluster has to be viable. Go spend 1.5 years with your kind of thing. And now, you know, there is a government of India scheme, which of course doesn't mandate institutions like DMI to involve, but IIMs and IITs have to involve. It's called Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. Go through the guidelines. Unnat Bharat Abhiyan mandates. It was inaugurated by the current Prime Minister in my ministry when I was in Delhi, but it's run by HRD. That is every institution, and AICTE, UGC, IIT group, IIM group, they've all issued instructions to all the things. In Kerala, it is being led by IIT Palakkad. So form a partnership with this on the guise of UBA, Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, and do this kind of nurturing beacons. And DMI does rural management. And what does rural management mean? That is the biggest hole the whole Panchayat does thing. Irma did phenomenal work, unbelievable work in translating the core principles of management into practical things for a cooperative, a small government, a village government. The best management principles, maybe originating from Howard, would be converted, not just cut and paste for a thing. Now, there is a need to develop management modules for institutions. In fact, when I was Secretary Panchayat Raj, I had written to Irma, but then by the time Irma's reply came, I had left. So there's a big area that DMI can take up. How to manage a panchayat. We teach them the law, we teach them how to prepare a plan. And there is a whole possibility that I wanted to keep it to the last. Gram Panchayat Development Plan, which is mandatory. So it is not optional. Bihar, in the earlier 15th Finance Commission, got about 29,000 crore. Now it must be around 40-50,000 crore over 5 years. It can go only to the Panchayat. Then MG and RGS, you must be spending nearly 3,000 crores, I guess. And Bihar should be spending about 10,000 crores. Kerala spends 3,500 crores under Narendra. So Bihar, by that count, should be spending 10,000. So 10,000 with this 50,000 would be 20,000 crore a year. And nobody else can spend that money. It can't be spent by government. So you have to, whether you like it or not, get it done through the panchayats. And I think I use this opportunity, though it's a Foundation Day lecture, to exhort DMI and your team to go ahead and, muddying the hands and dirtying your feet, try to do this is very, very important. And as you asked, I'm sure my services are at your disposal as long as it is for panchayat or rural development or poorest of the poor. And it is pro bono. It's pro bono. It's not a consultancy service. It's a pro bono service. Of course, now travel has become very difficult, but a lot of things can be transacted over Zoom or this thing. So let me once again warmly thank you and for giving me
Thank you, sir, for this enlightenment session. So, if you open your chat box.
Yeah, I've seen the first question. I'll answer that. Party-based or without party? It's a big question. But I'm more influenced by the Kerala thing. The advantage with the partyless is if you genuinely have partyless panchayats, yes, they are better than anything else. But do you think in any area, maybe except in some tribal areas, you will get a partyless panchayat? Somebody will be doing from a cat's paw. Some politician will be, I've seen to control you. And you keep shifting depending on various incentives, or to put it very mildly. Party means you are bound to a party, and if you perform badly, it hits that party. That's one thing. And party means you have a coherent ideology. You have to have coherent ideology. And in a party panchayat, you can't be casteist beyond the point, particularly in terms of atrocities on SCs. You can't. If you have a party, then you will be pulled up. The national media, social media will pull you up. So there are advantages. But I'm not saying for party or against party. My simple thing is it realistic? If you have a realistically partyless panchayat, go ahead. Let us not be hypocritic and say panchayats, presidents will not contest on symbols, but then they will become party people otherwise. That is very unhealthy.
May I come in for a minute, sir?
Yeah, Balamurugan, yes.
Sir, thank you, sir. It's always so inspiring to listen to you, sir. And in fact, I don't have a question, but just wanted to inform you, sir. We spoke a year before regarding Panchayat SHG convergence. It got delayed due to COVID, and finally we signed a MOU with Kudumbashree, sir, and I'm using this opportunity, as Arvind sir is also here as both Rural Development Principal Secretary and also Panchayat Raj Principal Secretary, and I think right time to kickstart that work, sir, Panchayat and SHG convergence. And the most important aspect which I understood, I also always wondered that convergence is the most difficult part, as you rightly observed. The best way to have convergence at Panchayat level, natural way. And we have taken note of a lot of inputs from the lecture today, particularly SHG as a service provider at Panchayat level and other aspects, and we'll certainly work on it, sir. And I'm taking again this opportunity to invite you in person. We'll communicate with you separately, personally, to have you to kickstart that SHG PRI convergence work, sir. I stop here, sir, and again, absolutely inspiring lectures.
Thank you, Balamurugan. I was very happy hearing some children stumble over your thing. I think probably your children were playing around. So
Sir,
that I
yes,
really
sir.
liked. But then on a serious note, this certainly is a very positive development. Don't aim very big, very slow start as you started Jivika probably in 2007. But
Sir.
rooting that is very important. Of course, my service will be there, though I'm slightly scared of traveling even now. Even the third wave has come down, but it's not come down in Kerala to the extent we would have liked. But I can certainly come. And initial guidance, we have a brainstorming and all that. I would like you to talk to the Arvind particularly, to talk to the Urban Development Secretary of Odisha. He is using SNGs for functions of the municipalities, which I didn't dream of in Kerala. In fact, we had an interaction on what Kudumbashree can do, and he took it, and then our Kudumbashree people went there. But the way he has rolled out is phenomenal. Lot of this extension services, which are essentially municipal functions, are being done by SNGs as a service provider on payment, which is a huge opportunity. You can talk to him and find out. Really,
We'll do that, sir.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Thank you, sir.
I would also like to say something, sir. Arvind, yes, sir.
Yeah, I see.
So it has really been a great pleasure listening to you after quite a long gap, sir.
4 years.
And every time I listen to you, almost as if I'm a college student listening to my lecturer. So it's just like that, sir. I remember when I had joined Jivika right in the very beginning, and maybe in after 6 months' time, I thought I know quite a lot. And that was the time when I got a chance to go to NIRD and I met you there. And then I suddenly realized. And now, even after spending more than 13 years, 15 years, I would say, in this sector, there is so much more to learn. Every day you are learning. So one of the most important things that you said, sir, in my opinion, is the best form of empowerment is to trust. Now, the trust should not only be on paper or in written documents, it should actually be visible by your actions. And the same thing I remember in Jivika also, we started with trust in the capacity, innate capacity of the people. And that is how it moves. But how do you actually roll it out? You said slowly, with a lot of training and all. And one very important thing that you said, sir, is about the resource clusters. If there are few pockets which are doing well, and if we are able to bring people from other areas to go and spend time in those pockets, when they'll go back, they'll improve their own areas as well. I think, sir, this is a very important lesson that we have learned, sir. I have had the privilege to work under your leadership also, sir. You were secretary, MORD, and I was in Jivika and later RD also, sir. I think, sir, you will be a little happy to hear that last year Bihar had 22.76 crore man-days under Manrega. And it was at 7th position. Kerala was in 13th position with 10.22 crore man-days. So last year was quite different. This year also, sir, we have crossed 13 crore man-days. In between, for quite some time, more than I would say 5-6 months, the wage component was not available.
Yeah, all over.
And once that happens, the interest of the labor goes down. It's very difficult to pick it up. So that has been the reason. Otherwise, this year also, sir, we believe that we'll go up to around 17-18 crore man-days. And there, I'm assuring you, sir, that we are utilizing the panchayats, we are utilizing the SHGs, our cluster facilitation team, CFT program, which is now CFP program, we have handed it over to Jivika. It is being run by Jivika, and instead of some professionals, we are saying that the Jivika SHGs, their livelihood specialists, should be working as the specialists for CFP program also. So that convergence has started happening, and we have started yielding, reaping some good results as well. In my last tenure also, sir, you had offered, I think in 16, 17, you had offered that for strengthening of panchayats in Bihar, you are offering your service pro bono anytime, sir. And
I'm getting older.
and our weakness that we have not been able to actually utilize it fully, sir. But I'll tell you, sir, there have been some very good developments. And one important development was the two schemes. One was Har Ghar Nal Ka Jal and Gali Nali Pakki Karan. So what was done in Har Ghar Nal Ka Jal, sir? The not only the panchayats, in fact, that function was devolved up to the ward level. And I think Bihar probably will be the only or one of the few states where ward level committee or ward sabha is part of the bylaws, is part of the Panchayat Niyamavali. And WIMC, Ward Implementation and Management Committee, has that kind of statutory backing now. And because of their support, sir, because of their working, Bihar, which initially had the one of the lowest piped water coverage, is now among the top 4 states in the country. There may be, again, you rightly said, there may be some questions. Some people will say that the quality is not good at this stage, that stage. Sir, I have seen the data, sir. We have around 1,14,000 wards. And what we focused on was small mini water schemes, which could be managed and run, operated by the ward level committees. A ward is smaller unit, around 150 households. So that's quite a viable unit where they can run it, operate it, maintain it. Making it one time was not a big issue, sir. That could have been done anyway. But how do you ensure that this kind of asset which is built is actually owned by the people and it continues? There, sir, we learned from various lessons by at the local level, and based on that, sir, we designed that program. And there the panchayats have played absolutely important role and done very good work. On any particular day, out of 1,14,000 wards, there are issues in 400, 500 wards. But there are no issues in rest of the wards. So I see that as more than 99% running on any particular day is something I couldn't have imagined when I joined the service. So I think that is one thing that will make you happy, sir. Another thing that is being done this year is about the solar street light system, where wards will be selecting the points where the solar street lights will be put up. They'll be put up on the existing electricity poles only. So that will reduce the cost to some extent. Panchayats will select certain additional points if they think that's needed. They have been given that choice for identifying 10% more such places. BREDA will be providing us the technical support, and panchayats will be operating and running this, making payments for all this through their own funds. And this also, I think, sir, within 2 years, we should be able to roll this out, sir. Gali Nali Pakki Karan and the sanitation work, there also the panchayats have taken a very good lead and they are working. And Bala also said, sir, rightly, that now is the time when panchayat SHG convergence could play a very important role. And we have seen that wherever, so you will be happy to note that now GPDP is formal and GPDP is backed by a very good IT backbone. So everything is to be entered online. And for that, the work is done in every panchayat now. Though still the quality won't be as high as we would like it to be, but in some pockets, it's very good. The participation, you rightly said, sir, nearly 70% of the participants in the Gram Sabha are the women. And once they started participating in large numbers, then obviously panchayats had to hear their voice. So I think sir, some kind of shift is happening. But sir, some very important lessons that we learned from you today, sir. Again, I was reminded about the trust thing. I was reminded about how local resource mobilization could be done. Some of the things that you said are really very fascinating. How the panchayats are now thinking about making themselves carbon neutral. So if you could elucidate a little more about that, that would be very, very helpful, sir. One last point I wanted to add was that Bihar also has started a very kind of campaign, Jal Jeevan Haryali Abhiyan. This campaign is aimed at ensuring that the groundwater is replenished, recharged, and a lot of work is being done in that sector, sir. And there also the role of panchayat, role of Manrega, other existing schemes is very, very important, sir. So, sir, I mean,
It's really fascinating story you have told. That's so much of improvement. I was keeping track till 16. After that, I've been only talking over this thing. I came there once. So it's really remarkable. Really remarkable. I think I came there in 2018 beginning. Or 18 or 19 beginning for that Jubilee celebration or something. So it's a remarkable, I think, from big movement, not ordinary movement. So I should congratulate you and your team. So the question you asked on the whole trust, actually, it's what I have given it this thing called the soft devolution. Hard devolution is giving the money, this thing. This is soft devolution. Yes, we trust you. And that was best in evidence during COVID. So they delivered. And that's an important point I've been saying for a long time. This soft devolution. I was even pre-COVID, like when I used to go to Missouri, the youngsters are not very interested in Panchayat Raj. So I used to tell them, as a collector, you trust the Panchayat. Call the Panchayat presidents at the block level, talk to them, give them a task, go back 3 months later, they would have done it. So that is a trust. You trust them to deliver and they will deliver. That's a kind of thing. Then on this carbon neutral, as I told you, it requires some handholding. So we had one NGO which went to, our panchayats are large, with a population of 25,000, maybe double the size of the Bihar panchayats. And they did a calculation of what exactly is the carbon contribution from the panchayat. And mostly the answer is 90% watershed management. Planting trees to absorb that kind of species of trees. And all that. I have some document, I will send it to you. This is for a hill area panchayat. It may not be applicable there, but that concept is very important. Another concept is that ministry is also pushing SDGs, localizing SDGs. The fascinating potential, not just a slogan, but it's very difficult. In fact, for the Finance Commission, I wrote the chapter 2 days back, the first draft, the comments of experts. So I find it's very, very fascinating. And I'll give you one more idea, because Kerala has not started, it's being discussed. Localizing SDGs, they have started. The next step is communitizing SDGs. How do you get your SDGs into SDGs? Don't think of numbers and indicators and all that. Just think of certain core principles of SDG and what the energies, right from the SDG, they start doing this. I will send you a concept note, provided you keep it with you. You don't disclose it till I present it in the legislature. So, I mean, it's very fascinating. Communitizing SDGs and localizing SDGs, which is another activity which students of DMI can pick up. It's all part of your work, a part of rural development, that kind of work. Now, I think some questions have come. I'll answer them. Disaster mitigation through panchayat involvement. First, it was almost spontaneous, no instructions, nothing. They managed to bring all the SDGs together, send out teams, basically flooding, which you also have, and then arranging boats, all those kind of things, rescuing people, taking them to this thing, looking after their health. That is the first rescue, relief, initial relief, totally through panchayats. Based on that, in 19, Kerala instructed the panchayats to prepare a small disaster management plan, where there is more in a technical sense, like which are the areas which will be flooded. And after so much of rain, when they can foresee. So early warning systems. And then which school you will take them to, which are stable. Those have toilets and all those kind of things. Then you get the phone numbers of voluntary doctors and those who have all those equipments which are required for floods. So now all panchayats have that. So they can straight away jump into the rescue and relief part of it. The next question. One is holistic planning. Of course, we are now caught up in the sectoral kind of thing. So if you completely go to holistic, give an untied fund, we find they spend most of the money on roads. I think that must be true of any state. Panchayats are very fascinated with the roads. They'll go and spend all the money in roads. So in Kerala, they gave money untied, but they said 30% should be spent on the productive sector. Not more than 30% on infrastructure. 10% should be spent on people. So you give broad sectoral kind of thing. Within that, you have total freedom and you give a guidance. So that way we can do this. The key, address key development challenges through local planning for disaster preparedness. I also want to add like bunds, trees, and in Kerala has a lot of hills, we have unstable slopes, doing watershed management, Narega. These are things which we have been trying to do. Next question is, so that is again on disaster management. I think I mentioned that.
Okay. If someone from the
Yeah, corruption cases in panchayats. One, of course, panchayats have a huge transparency requirement. They have to publish everything. Actually, the Kerala Panchayat Raj Act had the absolute right to information in 1999. So anybody can go out and ask for a photocopy and all that. That is one thing. Then the sheer working with SNGs. Because women are seeing things. They may not go and protest. Because Kerala Panchayats are political and they are very strong. But that brings down the corruption. Then again, we have formal mechanisms. We have an ombudsman, who is a High Court judge, serving or retired, but not like the usual ombudsman where, like Lokayukta, you give a advice and somebody decides. Here they can disqualify a mayor if they find that's corruption. And they can set right or wrong. If the panchayat has given a benefit to a wrong person, the ombudsman can correct it. So there are certain mechanisms. We are strongly pushing for a social accountability law. I don't know whether the government announced it in governor's address, but it was not formalized. It's very difficult. A social accountability law, where a lot of things will come as a package of social accountability, which will have IT, disclosures, social audit, citizen surveys, citizen participation, the whole gamut of measures. That is what is being lobbied by a lot of people. And though I'm retired, wherever I have space, I try to push this. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone? No. Question we have. Actually, the whole DMI fraternity is sitting here, so they will.
Yeah, they should ask.
Yeah.
I am Professor Devashish Kundu. I am a faculty at DMI. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can. Little difficulty, but yeah, speak loud. I can hear.
Yeah. I am Professor Devashish Kundu.
Yes.
I am faculty at DMI. It was very nice hearing you, and you shared a lot of experience with us. I have two questions to ask, sir. It is not exactly a question, it is more of your views or your take on this question. So in the urban infrastructure, the public-private partnership have worked so well. Why not in the rural infrastructure? It can be a collaborative rather than a competitive relationship. Like we are talking about a fraternity, a community fraternity. The local traders, the local businessmen, who are the input suppliers and all, why can't they be the part of the local community? Why they can be formally a part of the local community? So that they are equally responsible to take the task forward. See, it is not that I gain something out of my community. It is a long-term prospect which I am looking at. Today I am giving something, tomorrow I get back as a community, my community will get back, where I will also be one of the beneficiaries. So what is your, I mean, how can it be done? I mean, why is it not done? Second is the system of doors apparently to catch votes has raised an expectation for cash doors for community contribution. This is prominently expressed by the government functionaries at the rural levels. When we talk about the community contribution, they say that there is a quid pro quo. You have to give something to get that contribution, to get the services of the community. So, your views on that, sir? Thank you, sir.
The first is PPP in rural areas is very doable. But one caution, rural local governments have a lot of precious land, commons. So your real estate people are very powerful, particularly in suburban panchayats. And most of Gurgaon land was rural land, which all became with the local people not getting. So if there is an independent institution which can look at the contract of PPP is very critical. They're not very careful. The 90% of the time government gets into a bad bargain. Because I myself seen many PPPs, and we used to have a PPP framework for local governments, but only 2 panchayats did it. Most of them were municipalities. But I think it should be tried with the only caution that you have a framework where the risks are clearly brought out, who bears the risk and what is the benefit the community gets. Otherwise, the fellow will benefit from land and may give you a measly return. That is again the only caution. Then the second question, it was is the contribution from the people, if I understood right. Yes, people do contribute when they know that there is a very definite benefit and they are not going to, because their money goes. So, like for example, you go and tell the people, if I have 100 rupees for you, we give 50 rupees, you will get an asset or 150, then they will give. But the advantages of the contribution is people will be more vigilant that their donation is not eaten up by some official or elected person. So there will be a greater vigilance. And they will, if you get a very well-performing asset, the panchayat will get more votes than some at dole. It's proven. It's proven. And here again, I wanted to mention a point: politics of profit and politics of performance. At the panchayat level, there is something people want some recognition. I've wondered why some people are spending so much money, and I'm not naming the states, becoming the sarpanch. There is no fund. Even if you eat up the entire fund, you will not make up the money you spend. Then they said recognition, the family recognition. My grandfather was a sarpanch. So this recognition, you can turn it to the developmental side also. So if you do this development, you'll be remembered for so many years. So that is a very subtle way of incentivizing, building capacity of panchayats. So they shouldn't be afraid of collecting resources if they are able to deliver.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. And so in the first case, in the PPP partnership, yes, you are correct. Lot of control systems have to be developed as a part of the contract. Control systems can be put in place, but that can be thought of as a futuristic view. That that may succeed better, provided we have control systems in place. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the insights.
Namaskar, sir.
Yeah.
My name is Amrita Prima. I'm also a faculty member at DMI. First of all, many thanks to you for covering the many dimensions which are related to local governance issues. Like you rightly summed it up, right from the 74th CAA to current issues which are still lingering in the performance and functioning of the local governance in India. And you very beautifully compared the 2 states which are on the stark ends, the Kerala and Bihar. One question which still kind of perturbs us, like when 74th CA was there, we talked about decentralization, we talked about devolution, we are still talking about all those. And the one very important thing, or rather the critical element we talked about, was participatory governance. And our director talks about deliberative democracy. So having taken those two topics, in reality, the ground panchayats today are mere units of implementation. They are not the local governance units the way it is envisaged, who will do governance and planning in a participatory way involving the citizens who are there. So how do you really guide us? Like we also work with two panchayats in Bihar. We tried working with them, but the mindset of people, the time we enter the village, the very first question they ask is, what do you have for me? आप क्या लेके आए हो, क्या दोगे? Though we make it clear that the mindset is there only. So with these things which are there at the background, how do you really work with these local governance unit, so that they become more participatory? And of course, the role of rural government, the rural development department and the government is very critical there. As you mentioned, building that trust. So how do we really work with them in building the trust and so that the transformation can really happen where the local government, the town panchayats become more of self-reliant?
Okay, the biggest thing possible, you have that possibility is very real now, because the Bihar government doesn't have to give more money to panchayats. They already have Narega and your 15th Finance Commission money, and Ministry of Rural Development fortunately have instructed that you will combine the two. You'll have a single plan for Narega and this. So you have the money. Now the demand factor. Straight away, Gram Sabhas cannot be activated. People don't come to the Gram Sabha. It's not easy anywhere in the country. So, but you have this Gram Sabha substitute, which is a network of women. So even if only 100 people come, they can do a discussion. That is a pre-Gram Sabha discussion in the SHGs, going up and up. And ultimately, each SHG can send 2 volunteers to talk on this issue. And that becomes a live thing, because ultimately, Gram Panchayat elections, things are decided by a few hundred votes, less than 100 votes. So they can't just brush aside people. The third point on this participation is, interest in participation is, one, people give a lot of suggestions and we forget it, we do something else. So if you are able to track what suggestions are coming, what you did, and report back, some proof system doesn't work very well always. That will again enthuse people. Last time we asked for it, we got it. So that is the kind of thing. Again, a very important practical suggestion is, you don't go to a Gram Sabha and say who should get a benefit. Let them decide. There are beautiful techniques on decide what your priorities are. Before deciding what the priorities, what should be the norm for prioritization? When you ask this question to the worst kind of citizens, they will come out with fantastic answers. What should be the norms for prioritization? Then only people will think. Otherwise, don't think that even expert people understand development. When somebody comes and says, I will give you, you say, okay, give it. So you become an agency contract kind of thing. But there you're saying, how should my village develop? What should be the criteria for deciding the most important project? People will come out with brilliant solutions. Somebody will say absolute poor should be helped. Somebody will say irrigation should be extended, more of this thing. Some norm should come, not what scheme, some norm. Then use the norm and ask for priorities. Either in the Gram Sabha or this, then you get into a very rational kind of decision. That is people's plan. Otherwise, people don't know how to plan. They will say, if you ask me, I will say, I want an electric light in my front of my house. I want a Pakka road to my house. All of us are selfish. So getting out of the selfishness is to get the norms. And then based on the norms, you come to priorities and allocate resources. Then participation will increase because everybody has a stake. So one is the SHG route. Second is deciding the norms and priorities and participatory planning. And then preparing a plan for all the resources you have under your command. It could be more than Narega and this. And I can also tell you, Karnataka did this very well. They came out with a huge list of what is called no cost and low cost planning. Their panchayats don't have to spend money. They just ensure that the Anganwadi food is good, that the village school teacher comes. So it doesn't involve a cost, but it involves a lot of activity, action. So that again is something you can even write down in the Bihar context, some 30, 40 things which panchayats can do without spending money. And that again, and that gives a lot of societal recognition. when you don't spend. Since you had a culture of Nyaya Panchayats, even dispute resolution, informal, alternative could be tried. So these are ways of kind of having your participation multi-dimensional.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. This is Sridhar from DMI. I'm an associate professor here. My question is related to sir, this Mission Antyodaya and e-Gram Swaraj. Just want to know how these two, Mission Antyodaya and e-Gram Swaraj, where you can kind of check the finances online here in real time, how the budget is made, how the expenditure is made. How are these things helping the Gram Panchayat development? I just want to understand because being a comparative analysis of Odisha and Bihar or some other state related to these two particular aspects. I just understand.
One is you said e-Gram Swaraj, and the other is
Mission Antyodaya.
Mission Antyodaya. Okay. Mission Antyodaya is a participatory plan for poverty reduction, reaching the last person. So you bring in all the resources, Narega, Gram Panchayat Development Plan, and use the SHGs into this. So based on that, I didn't put it as clearly as I wanted. The SHGs could prepare the basic plan because they are much better. Because Gram Sabha sitting in and all that looks theoretical. So the basic planning, you give a framework, each SHG will prepare whatever they want, but they should not prepare for local needs. They should prepare for larger needs like your hospital and all that. Let it be consolidated, and at the Gram Panchayat level, you present it as a kind of, this is our demand. Then Gram Panchayat may or may not change it, but they can't change it beyond a point. So in that sense, Mission Antyodaya has this. E-Gram Swaraj is more using electronic things for planning, like your GIS maps are very good. So go to the Gram Sabha with a GIS map saying this is the uncovered area of water supply, this is the uncovered area of connectivity, this is the uncovered area of irrigation, and this is where the poor people are concentrated with least housing. So when you get into that, using electronic, Gram Swaraj is not just that, a lot of kind of things. This really helps. So now everybody has access to mobile and all that, smartphone. So you can reach out to people using these electronic maps of the village, everything mapped, so that, and you put layers on layer, and then you will find certain portions of the village have been neglected. Even internally, people who didn't know. So that is again the way. Then of course, your fund transactions are very transparent. It goes very fast. You can, corruption can be brought down, and all those kind of advantages are there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So there is another question on the screen. Kerala experience regarding GPDP process.
Okay, in fact, the GPDP process borrowed a lot from Kerala, in the sense that Kerala had a structured people's plan process. That brings me as an answer to something which Arvind also said. See, how to develop a local methodology. GPDP is a very generic methodology. So in Kerala in 1991-92, I mentioned an NGO, People Science Movement called KSSP. They took one panchayat, that is pre-decentralization, pre-constitutional amendment, and spent a lot of their energy, time in preparing a model plan, following the process, very intensive participatory process, which is also scientific. And Kerala first is needs assessment, not just through Gram Sabha, through working group consisting of officials and non-officials. Like he mentioned, CFT. In Kerala, you can get non-official volunteer, everything volunteer, not paid, to sit in the panchayat and develop this project. It will also be a status study. And the panchayat prepares a development report once in 5 years. So all this combined the situation analysis. Then they hold a larger consultation beyond Gram Sabha. Of course, Gram Sabha is there. That is called development seminar, the local word, which again, broadly you call teachers, some educated people, farmers, all those key representatives of the whole panchayat, maybe 200, 300 people. They kind of discuss and say, this should be our next step, this should be a priority, this you reprioritize. Then it goes back to the working group on subjects. They kind of projectize the whole thing. Then the panchayats decides the resource allocation. We'll give 20% of the GPDP for water, 10% for irrigation, and all those kind of things. And then they get help for projectization. Most important point is the panchayat projects may not be technically good. So we used to have, that is now stopped, is being revived, what is called a technical advisory group. At least 1/3 of them would be volunteers, retired officials, retired people, civil society people. They go through the project and give them advice. No, but they can't say don't use this project. They will give them advice, improve it this way, you will not be able to do this, and go back to the panchayat. So there's a technical support plus participatory element, with panchayats getting the final decision in resource allocation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
So if we have no questions, then I'll ask Director sir to have closing remarks, and then we'll go with the vote of thanks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Suryabhushan. Thank you, Vijayanand sir. It was an enlightening experience. It has always been. I have had the privilege of interacting with you, and I was very keen to bring that experience to my colleagues, to our students, and to our participants. I take, in particular, I hold on to your offer of guiding us, and we would come back to you with specifics and seek guidance. What you say, the principal takeaways are a few. As an institute at DMI, we should in particular learn a couple of things that KSSP did, picking up one Gram Panchayat, trying to develop a methodology, picking up a one resource cluster, working with them to see how it works. Be experimental, sir. In the DMI's visioning of DMI as an institution, we have something called care centers, which are collaborative action research centers. And I think getting into these initiatives would be a good way to realize what was envisioned for us at the foundation stage. And sir, it's wonderful to have received the guidance. That's what we were looking for a lecture that starts us off on some serious academic engagements. We would be taking things forward. Thank you so much, sir. And I thank Sri Balamurugan ji and also Arvind Chaudhary ji for coming online and sharing their thoughts. And it's been a wonderful experience today. Thank you so much, sir.
And I should thank you, and I should thank both Arvind and Balamurugan for coming. I never expected such senior officers to come on a Sunday and listen to me. So I feel honored, but they were very keen. Okay.
So, I on behalf of GMI and the entire other supporting organization team, even a special guest like Sri Arvind Chaudhary ji and Sri Balamurugan ji, let me call it a fraternity here together, and on my own behalf, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all attendees for gracing this occasion and sharing with you your opinions and insight today. A big thank you to Vijayanand sir for his, in fact, work towards this and the clarity of thought. In fact, the biggest takeaway for me, actually, this chicken egg problem of trust versus cooperation. Now, at least for the time, it is little bit. I got a lot of clarity that it has to start with the trust, and then cooperation will emerge later on. That is how. So, a big thank you for taking your time and sharing your thought. It was truly engaging and enlightening to hear you. This is my first experience. So we acknowledge our gratitude to you, sir.
Thank you.
And we truly inspired by your great words and works, particularly on this. It's a very deep thinking. So I must also mention our a deep sense of, in fact, gratitude to Sri Arvind Chaudhary ji also for his sparing his valuable time to attend this online session. And Sri Balamuruganji, who is always there whenever we need him. So that is there. And then I also, since this is the time, in fact, any event doesn't happen overnight. So, and the wheels started rolling almost more than a month ago. So it requires a lot of planning as some bird's eye for details. So in this regard, I would like to take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to Mr. Jambunathan and the IT team for perfect logistic support and guidance he has extended to all of us at this particular occasion. So a big thank you to them because they have provided the online platform through which we are able to interact. I also thank our director. In fact, despite his personal preoccupations, he had not only shared the topic, but also speak with Vijayanand sir personally, persuaded him to deliver his lecture. So, in fact, a special thanks to him. And I do not know, the whole DMI fraternity is here on Sunday. So I hope we have not imprisoned him. So I cannot thank everyone enough for their involvement and their commitment, their willingness to take on this completion of tasks beyond their comfort zones. So, and it's a truly inspiring to work with the team. And we are fortunate to have with you highly motivated and dedicated colleagues of the institutes who know their job and they're result oriented. So thanks everyone. And have a safer and better world to live. That is how we are striving towards. So today the Bihar is already lifted all the restrictions. So let's hope for the best. Thanks everyone.
Professor Surya, may I request all colleagues who are present there to stand up and give a standing ovation to Vijayanand sir. Thank you so much, sir.
So bye, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Hope we meet soon.
Yes, sir.
Bye.
We'll break for lunch. We'll have lunch also. But only